Hello. Um, Day 2, Industry Workplace Safety. Couple quick things about the PowerPoint. This is page 1 here. Says, think about the chemicals you used, either in your workplace or it can be at home. I'm going to write them down. It says check boxes then if you know the effects. An example might be, chlorine bleach at home. You know the health effects? Well, really the health effects are, an irritant, skin irritation, lung irritation, obviously eye irritation, ingested, it's obviously a poison. Personal protective equipment, at home, do you wear rubber gloves when you're using, Clorox bleach? But at work you would be required to, because again it's an irritant. Safety glasses would be a good idea. And then the emergency procedures at work. If you're interested in seeing these, the material safety data sheets contain this information. Tells you what the ill effects might be, as well as any personal protective equipment that they recommend you wear. And then the emergency procedures as well. You can fill that out if as you'd like. Again, I recommend you at least look at a couple of different products, either at work again or at home. Then hazardous communication. Again, chemicals in the workplace. They list a few there: sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide. Obviously, those are hazardous. And then, it says one or more employees in the workplace working with those chemicals. Here they show, glyphosate or Roundup. If you're dealing with Roundup, you certainly need, rubber gloves on and things, especially on the job. And here it says, chemicals from inhaling the chemical agent, vapors, gases, dust, fumes, and mists, certainly can irritate the lungs. Skin contact. Again, irritants can, cause rashes and, redness and itching. Degree of risk handling, depends on, how long the exposure is. And then third, it says a hazard communication program, which, means a written program, material safety data sheets, labeling of the products, proper labeling, and then information and training so that people know, people working with those chemicals know what's important, what they should be wearing for personal protective equipment, and what the emergency procedures might be, and some of the dangers that come with it. And so it says hazard communication warns us that a chemical product is hazardous and tells us how the product can harm us, if we use it improperly. Again, a couple of different labels you might see in that bottom square there. And so hazardous communication, it says it's the right to know things. How does it work? Employees have both the need and right to know those hazards. Material safety data sheets is one step that we talked about on the last slide. They contain information on the health hazards, any PPE you might need, and the emergency procedures if somebody is exposed, or ingested or whatever. Then there's labels and warnings. Again, when the product is shipped in, the supplier gives puts a label on it. If as the employer we use a different bottle, say, to take something out of a 55-gallon drum, we may need to put a label on it and have the warning signs on it. We need a written program as far as hazardous communication goes. Again, goes along with the information and training. What the written program is, where the MSDS sheets are kept, because you have to have access to them at all times in case it's the middle of the night when somebody spills chlorine on their hands. Where do I go find the MSDS sheets to know what the emergency procedure is? All of these things combined are what we said on the last slide, and this slide again is the gives us an informed worker. rules apply to, and it says any chemicals that an employee may be exposed to, compressed gases fall into there. I wouldn't think about, compressed oxygen, but acetylene, for welding and cutting, would realize without even thinking about it that that's pretty dangerous. Although any compressed gas can be a problem. Flammable or combustible materials, and it gives the three categories. Flash point below 141 degrees Fahrenheit. Flammable solids, just can't be near open flame. And then combustible materials, flash point greater than 141 but less than the 200. And it says, propane, hydrogen gas, acetone, gasoline, all fall into that category. And then oxidizing materials like hydrogen peroxide, they can, ignite flammable and combustible materials and have their own sets of danger. And so, anytime we're handling any of those are also chemicals, that fall into our hazardous communication. Poisonous and infectious materials, again, here they list hydrogen sulfide and sodium cyanide. Again, those can cause death, almost immediately or very quickly, if you were to, ingest them, but they can still cause, some major problems just with contact. Here they list other toxic effects, and asbestos is in that list. Again, people were used to working in asbestos all the time without much protection. They've ended up with cancer, and now it's a major no-no to work on asbestos without all kinds of extra equipment on. Biohazards, again, anytime I see biohazard, I think hepatitis B, HIV, bloodborne pathogens. Corrosive materials, and again, this is the symbol you'll see on corrosive materials. This is the symbol you'll see on biohazard as well. Corrosive materials, destroy tissue upon contact. And they list sodium hydroxide, hydrochloric acid. And again, those things will eat through your skin extremely quickly. Dangerously reactive materials. It says, these may self-react dangerously. They may explode upon standing or when exposed to physical shock. Certainly some dangerous materials. Again, need some rules for those. And then radioactive material. Again, I worked in a nuclear power plant. You get a couple of badges you wear all the time to make sure that you don't get an overexposure to radiation. Things they don't apply to: hazardous waste. Once it's garbage, then there's some different rules. Tobacco and tobacco products, wood and wood products, although again, sawdust and things can be, extremely irritant. Food and alcoholic beverages, drugs that are handled by the Food and Drug Administration, cosmetics, and then, it lists, ionizing and non-ionizing radiation and biological hazards. Again, I couldn't imagine building an MSDS, a material safety data sheet, for blood. Everybody's blood's a little different. So that's why they say the rules don't apply to them. We don't have to have MSDS and things. We need trainings for some of the biological hazards, bloodborne pathogens in particular, but we don't have to have an MSDS on it. Hazard determination, again, I don't know if I even say this correct, carcinogenicity. A carcinogen is a product that has been determined by OSHA to cause cancer. It's not a matter of if you'll get cancer. If you're dealing with a carcinogen and you touch it with bare skin, they say you're going to get cancer. Human data, again, when somebody gets irritated, everybody gets irritated every time they touch it, then it'll fall into a hazard and require us to follow these rules. Animal data, again, toxicology tests on animal populations. If it's harmful to animals, it's probably harmful to us. So again, it goes on the list. And then, adequacy and reporting of the data. Again, that's always a little bit of a problem, but any study which is conducted that sets up and uses scientific principles and determines that something could be hazardous to us, then it's it's a hazard. And it says responsibility of the producer and importers of chemicals, to provide those MSDS sheets and original labeling. Down here in this little box, it says, when an employer becomes a supplier, if you buy it in 55-gallon drums and separate it into quart containers and sell them as quart containers, then you have to have an up-to-date MSDS and warning label that you provide to whoever you sell those quart-sized containers to. Written program, again, available to the employee and the employee's representative, and to the OSHA rep if and when they show up. Again, labels, any labeling that you're putting on after you're changing the container, and even the labels that are on it from the manufacturer. The material safety data sheets, and again, where they are, where they're located, and then the training that's involved with the hazardous communication. Again, part of that training is where are the, what the labels mean and where the MSDS are kept. Then other subject areas in the written program would be, a list of overall what hazardous chemicals we have in the facility, or what you have at your job. And then any non-routine procedures. So you have a chemical that has to be kept at a certain temperature in a certain room. There would be a procedure written down about how to handle that chemical. And then any pipe and piping systems. If you're piping, chlorine through your facility to use in various areas, those pipes have to be, labeled and color-coded so that we know what hazards are there. And then multi-employer procedures, basically you need to hand out MSDS to the employees because, again, if I'm working for a construction company in here at NTC, NTC needs to provide those chemicals that they have to me as a construction worker. So they tend to just make a handout and hand a bunch of MSDS out, at a safety meeting. It says, inform the other employees of the labeling system and any precautionary measures. If there's some particular chemical that's more dangerous than what we run into on a daily basis, then some training there needs to take place. It says workshop, using this sample, complete all sections where a decision or response is necessary, evaluate the completed program to see if it meets the training. I didn't, choose to make this a turn-in assignment, but you can, look through it, again, kind of see what's required. You have to have somebody that is designated as the Hazard Communication Program Coordinator. That person's name has to be documented here. Then you have to determine what the hazard, what the procedures are. And then again, we talked about already the list of hazardous chemicals. And then you need a procedure, including any labeling or other forms of warnings that you might have. And then, again, part of those procedures is the material safety data sheets and where those safety data sheets are so that employees can find them, when they need them or if they need to refer to them in case of emergency. And then, it says methods to inform employees about hazards, of non-routine tasks and piping. Again, if you have any of those, then that would apply. And it says, use this paragraph only after you have evaluated your operation and determined that you have no processes which require non-routine tasks. And then it says for employees in draw stations. And then it says contractors about hazards. Again, in the written program, you have to have something that says, the contractor has to be informed of what chemicals are available, and then a little disclaimer basically there. It's the contractor's responsibility to train his employees in any hazards. Contractor must notify the hazard communication coordinator of any hazardous materials that they bring onto the site. So when I bring pulling soap to pull wires with as an electrician, I have to have an MSDS sheet available for the company so that if their employees get into it, they know what safety precautions there are. And then the last page of that covers the training, and again, it just talks about what their training ought to be, any PPE that they would need, any controls. Again, that's just a sample of the written program. Like I say, could have been an assignment, but I didn't choose to make it one. It would be rather lengthy for any of us, so I didn't require it. Then part 3, we talk a little bit about the labeling requirements. And again, you'll notice these little numbers up here in the corner. That's basically where you could find it if you had the OSHA's 1910 manual. It says that, chemicals, containers have to have labels and what has to be on them. Again, identity, of the chemical itself and the hazard warning that it's flammable. It also has to have the manufacturer's name and address. Okay. A secondary container would be one that your company uses. Again, 55-gallon drum. We, fill this gallon container up, and this gallon container sits there, at my workstation day after day. Then it has to have, again, the proper labels to identify the chemical and what the hazards are, because it's there for more than one shift. Portable container is if I go, and here they're saying acetone, I go to the 55-gallon drum and I get enough acetone for me to clean today and today only on my shift. And that's this box over here that says immediate use. It means the hazardous chemical will be under my control until it's empty. And there again, I have to then be familiar with acetone and its dangers. And depending on the chemical, I may be able to use whatever, and at the end of my shift, go and pour it back into the original bottle, or back into the original container, and my portable container then could be thrown away or disposed of properly. It may be something where I can't add that chemical back into the original container after I've taken it out because I do something, something with it. In that case, I would need to know the proper disposal of the chemical and then also of the bottle. Okay. Here's the article. It says rifleman's death caused worksite poisoning. It says metal worker died August 6th, 2 days after accidentally ingesting a highly toxic liquid. It says, noon he walked back to the truck, picked up a Gatorade bottle that contained antique black. Bottle still had the drink label on it, not marked as containing a chemical. He took a drink, swallowed one swallow, realized it was bad and spit it out. Immediately knew, what it was. They drove him to the hospital, but it was too much damage from swallowing the antique black. Like I said, it's considered accidental, but again, OSHA preventable had they properly labeled the containers, or if that was again back to the previous slide, a portable container, had the guy kept it, whoever was using it kept it in his possession so that it wasn't there for somebody else to drink out of. Again, the label should have been taken off either way, but that's an example of why it's important that we label things properly and to a certain extent not reuse containers. Labeling comes up. Again, this is more of the old system of labeling, the diamond, with the health, flammability, and reactivity sections in blue, red, and yellow. Health hazard, one says it's slightly hazardous. I don't know exactly what they're labeling here. 3 says it's flammable below 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Means I should be a little extra careful with it. Then reactivity, again, says whether it's stable or unstable and how it reacts. And then there's some special ones in this white one. In this case, it says it's an acid. It could be an oxidizer, an alkali. It could be corrosive or radiation hazard. Or they also have, minus W means use no water on the product. This is the old system set up by the NFPA. Today, more and more people are using to these hazardous material information systems. Again, use similar numbers as we used in the top ones. And then a good chance here to put personal protective equipment in there. They can say, safety glasses or safety glasses and rubber gloves or whatever that chemical is. This one a little bit different, but again, it shows reactivity and protective equipment. So again, if we need certain personal protective equipment, it could be listed there. Make sure you wear safety glasses, respirator if it was some chemical that was, extremely toxic, fumes or vapors, might be listed in there. Other labeling requirements, pipes and piping systems, I said before, if there's chemicals going through the plant and pipes, they have to be, identified. Obviously, we shouldn't take any labels off that are hazardous chemical labels. One of the few things we require, or the government requires, be in English. It says all of our labels have to be in English, have to be prominently displayed. Again, they're not required on pesticides. Farms kind of have their own rules. And then chemical substances, that are part of the Toxic Substance Control Act. The EPA has some different rules there. And then, things that, again, we kind of talked about before that aren't covered: food additives, color additives, drugs and cosmetics, things covered by the Food and Drug and Cosmetic Act. Food and Drug Administration handles those. Veterinary items, it says distilled spirits, beer, wine, alcohol don't have to be labeled, even though, again, they can be hazardous. And then agricultural seeds, agricultural items, even if they're treated with pesticides, then they have to be labeled according to the Federal Seed Act, not according to OSHA. And then metal, woods, and plastics, says label with the initial shipment, not after that. Then part 4 is material safety data sheets. Again, your employer has to make these available to you. It says any hazardous chemicals, again, they have to be in English, readily available during any normal work hours. So if your plant's open 24 hours a day, they can't be locked in the safety director's office, because, again, they have to be immediately accessible during any emergencies. Where I'm buying the product or whatever on initial shipment, they can send me an MSDS, and then if they ship me the same product every month for years, I don't have to send it again until there's some sort of update, either to the MSDS or to the product itself. And it says, if I call OSHA and say, hey, I can't get an MSDS from, Bill's Wholesale because they, evidently don't have them, then OSHA would go out and investigate those MSDSs. Remote work sites, so a situation like we have here in Wausau, the material safety data sheets could be kept here in Wausau and not in Anago and Spencer and Wittenberg and all the other remote campuses. But again, it wouldn't make much sense because they're not readily available and immediately accessible by the people in those areas. So remote work sites, we keep them here. Our MSDS for NTC are on the computer, so they are accessible from any of those locations. So people can see them. Again, kind of a sample here of a material safety data sheet. Didn't make this an assignment either, but again, you could pick a chemical if you'd like and fill in, the information. Then part 5, or the last part, is information and training. And you need to train somebody. It says on initial assignment, first time you're going to work with a chemical, you need to be trained properly. And then the only other time would be when a new hazard is introduced. So we bring a new chemical on, into the school or into the plant that people have to use. They need training on, how to properly use it. Again, those are the 2 that it's required most of the time for information and training. OSHA recommends refresher type courses, like once a year, to have a small, we'll call it safety meeting, and remind everybody what the rules are for the wax we put on the floor, or the stripper that we use to strip the wax off the floor. So again, the information that we need is where the access is to the MSDSs, what the standards are, and then the training is what labels we put on and what the warnings are, what the hazard is and how to know if you're being exposed to that hazard, and then what protection to wear. And again, they've got some required elements here, an overview of this, what chemicals are available in the workplace, again, part of the chemical list, location and availability of the written program, physical and health effects, again, big arrow here. Where can you find this information? Material safety data sheets, probably the number one spot. The number two spot would be on the labeling. Again, it may be fully described on the labels, but one or the other, certainly you should be at least aware of where to find those things. And then it says, methods of observing the techniques to determine the presence or release of the hazardous chemical, and then how to reduce that exposure. Again, personal protective equipment. And really, again, if you're exposed to some of these, knowing what the labels in the MSDS mean are important. Again, here in this, in the electromechanical program, what are we exposed to? Potentially hydraulic fluid. Again, you might ask the instructor, what the health hazards, the health effects are of the hydraulic fluid. Again, probably an irritant, harmful or fatal if swallowed. So again, use some common sense. Hydraulic fluid is not a drink, right? So don't drink it. Be careful when we're touching it. Again, you can get. We always have rubber gloves available in the fluid power lab in case there is a leak and somebody doesn't want to risk exposure. And that's about it for day one. Again, we also look at the what do you call them? Oh, in the learning plans we call for the sheets. It says as a review. Gosh, if I could find it. As a review, look at the number 3 on the what's listed as the handout. It's handouts 1 through 12 in day 1 of Blackboard. Again, I'm going to pull my Blackboard version over just to bring it up. Again, number 3, it says MSDS example. So we'll scroll down and just look at that. Again, similar to what we see in the PowerPoint. Here's a material safety data sheet on old bull mold grease. It says who the manufacturer is, emergency numbers, the sizes that it comes in, up to a 5-gallon pail. Health risk, slightly hazardous. Flammability, it does have the possibility of burning. Reactivity, it is unstable if heated. And then protection, it says consult the MSDS or your supervisor. It gives the ingredients that are in there. And then some information about those. Again, we'll talk about PEL a little bit on day 2. And then it gives some health effects, acute and chronic. Nose, really don't expect much vapor or smell off of it. Mouth, harmful or fatal if swallowed. Eyes, irritation, tearing, reddening, swelling. Skin, again, may irritate the skin, avoid long-term contact. Routes of entry into the body, skin or the eyes. Medical conditions, that can be an issue. Again, it goes on. Just an example of a material safety data sheet for you to look at. Again, here's even toxicology information and ecological information. And then what it also calls for us to look at, number 12, I believe. Back in here. Oh, number 10, which is on the OSHA website. Again, just talks a little bit about that. If I scroll to the bottom here. If it will let me. Oh. I said handout number 10, so I'm on to 12. So there you go. Again, navigating the OSHA website. OSHA.gov shows you some of the things, header bar, a few of the highlights, some links. Latest news, again, a great spot for you guys to go out and get your OSHA article. Worker fatalities tells you about injuries and death that occur. And then there's some videos. Again, just look through those things. This will help with part of the project. Again, being the OSHA article, and possibly some of your OSHA questions could come from here. Again, just one of your quote-unquote assignments is to get familiar with the OSHA website. Again, that it would be all for today. That should get you through day 2 of industry workplace safety.